Hello guys, and welcome back to this channel, and we have some interesting things to talk about today. So basically trying to marry the FIRS with the 2024 budget and to talk about revenue generation and how Nigeria can finance the budget for next year even without borrowing. It's very feasible, and I have my hypotheses, my theories that I want to share with you guys. Now this year, or well, I'll start from last year. So last year the FIRS actually generated 10.1 trillion naira. Now, the FIRS stands for the Federal Inland Revenue Service. This is the body that is tasked with the mandate of collecting tax for the government, be it personal income tax, be it corporate tax, be it tax from industries and other things. The FIRS collect this tax. Now there are over 60 revenue generating sources for the government, and the FIRS is just one that generates revenue from tax. Now, Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is very low. It's alarmingly low. It's ranging between 10 to 12% to GDP. That's very, very poor for a country that boasts or claims to be Africa's largest economy. To have a tax to GDP ratio of that size is really bad. But the present government is saying and claiming that it will try to ramp it up to about 25% tax to GDP ratio, and if that is attained, it's going to be a massive one for the economy. Now, certain persons may be seeing 26 trillion naira, which is the proposed budget for next year, as a big thing, but it's quite small. So in my opinion, there would likely be a supplementary budget toward the end of the third quarter, or most definitely by the fourth quarter of 2024. So this year, 2023, our budget for the year is 21 trillion naira. That's what was passed, by the then government, former President Muhammadu Buhari. And we are in the fourth quarter of the year, and we've already passed a supplementary budget of over 2 trillion naira to help us ramp up the activities of the year, and some will spill over into the first quarter of next year. Meaning that the 21 trillion naira was not enough. It didn't cover government expenditure for the year. So I strongly think that it will also cover for next year at 26 trillion naira. But then let's look at how much we think the FIRS can generate in order to help finance next year's budget if we are looking at not borrowing. So we'll start by looking at what has been done this year. So between January 1st till about 14th September of 2023, the FIRS generated about 8.5 trillion naira. Now, this is a historic high. We never had this amount of money come into the government in this period of time ever, but it's still very low compared to the potential that are within the economy. So we got 8.5 trillion between January and September this year. So let's keep 8.5 trillion. Now, the FIRS, had tried to reconcile and recover over 4 trillion naira, from some deals from NNPC and the NLNG. So that's 4 trillion that have been reconciled and have been brought back into the coffers, the purse of the FIRS. So we have 8.5 trillion plus 4 trillion. That would total 12.5 trillion naira. Now, this is what has been generated so far by the FIRS. So if you're not joining us, my name is Idika Nobot, and I'm your host, and this is Isaac Kanu. So we're looking at the FIRS and the 2024 budget. Now, moving on. The FIRS is projected to bring an additional 3 trillion between September, basically in the fourth quarter of the year. Now, those of us who follow economic trends, we understand that the busiest quarter of any year, majorly for Nigeria, is the third quarter. So things begin we begin the first quarter of the year and it's slow, and things begin to step up in the second quarter. By the third quarter, we see things reaching the peak, and then it begins to come down by the fourth quarter before the year comes to an end. So this is basically the fourth quarter of the year, and we are looking at bringing 3 trillion naira into the economy through the FIRS. Remember, if you're following us, 8.5 has been gotten from January to September. 4 trillion has been gotten through reconciliations and reassessment of some incentive and securities by the NLNG and the NNPC. That was 12.5 trillion plus 3 trillion that we're expecting will be what? 15.5 trillion. That's the amount of money that we are set to get this year from the FIRS alone. And this is including tax waivers. Understand that as a country, we have had a bad culture of tax waiving. And when I say bad culture, it's because we waive unnecessarily high amount of tax. Our annual tax waiver annually is about 6 trillion naira. How can we afford to waive off 6 trillion naira worth of tax on an annual basis? This is not this year or last year. This has been a trend, and it is, records have it that we're about to waive off 8 trillion naira worth of tax this year. Now, a tax waive does not mean that these people are not doing anything to the economy. It basically means that these people are doing other things and to get some tax cut or tax benefits. So maybe a company was supposed to pay tax worth X amount of naira. You may go ahead to build a road. Let me say 200 billion naira is his tax. You may go ahead to build a road or do something that may cost it about 100 billion or 150 billion and not pay tax. So instead of paying tax, it went on to do something that benefits the economy, the government, at no cost to the government. But then some of these projects, some of these things don't even equal up to the amount of money that these people should have paid as tax. Now, our tax waiver for this year, 2023, is roaming around figures between 6 and 8 trillion. That's huge. This is billions of dollars in very clear terms that we're waiving off. Now, the new administration have come to say that they are going to remove and eradicate tax waivers. So everybody should pay tax and the government will use the money to do what they should do. Nobody should do anything for the government again. So if we waive off tax, remember, tax waivers are roaming between 7 and 8 trillion. Let's keep it at 7 trillion. From our calculation, we see that FIRS is going to generate 15 trillion this year. If you add 7 trillion, that's 22 trillion. Are you seeing? Without tax waivers, we could have made enough money to finance this year's budget without tax waivers. Now, we are saying this at a time where the NNPC was producing, record low amount of crude oil because there was a lot of struggle within the year to ramp up production. But fortunately, for the last 3 months, NNPC has consistently increased oil production, and right now we are about 1.7 million barrels of crude oil productions per day is what we are currently working with as a country. Even Bloomberg came out to say that we have ramped up our crude oil production, and that is an amazing news for the government. Something else to also consider is the fact that prior to the free floating of the naira, we were receiving dollar at about 400 to 500 naira to a dollar officially. That meant that our tax from all these exportations was coming in at the rate of 450 naira to a dollar. But with the current exchange rate, we are poised to receive almost double the amount we get from the same businesses coming to the country in naira. Now that's huge. Now, with the abolishment of tax waivers, with further devaluation of the naira, with increased oil production, the FIRS is already set to achieve 25 trillion naira as revenue from tax by the year 2024 without breaking a sweat. This can be easily attained by the FIRS. From the things I've told you earlier, we have removed tax waivers, which will be about 8 trillion naira. We have increased oil production, and the naira has devalued. Well, let's not use the word devalued. The naira is floating freely and it's going to gain its true value in the coming months. That is already a lot of money coming to the country, that will come to the country by next year. If we're looking at what Dangote is bringing on board by next year, if we're looking at the AKK gas pipeline coming on by next year, if we're looking at the Port Harcourt refinery coming online by next year, if we're looking at some other business that have been signed between Nigeria and India from the G20 summit, between Nigeria and China, from the Africa-China summit, between Nigeria and the US from the Africa-US summit, and some other countries, is huge. If we pay close attention to the reforms around the tax industry right now, with what the current tax chairman is trying to do in order to bring in more people into the tax net and to reduce the amount of unnecessary taxes that have bedeviled the country, we are poised to generate a lot of revenue next year. But we are trying to stick to FIRS in this video. So the FIRS can, without a sweat, generate between 25 and 30 trillion naira next year from all what is coming on board on the economy by next year. So in my opinion, we would be able to finance next year's budget without borrowing. And if you can attain this, it's going to be a huge feat for the economy. It's going to make the economy more attractive to foreign investors. It's going to make the economy grow at a very high rate, because this present administration is predicting that the economy should be growing at about 7% to GDP, by 2025, and about 10% to GDP before 2030. Now, if we can attain that, which is very attainable, it will have a lot of ripple effect positively to the economy. Now, this is we're going to wrap it up for this segment of the video. We talked about FIRS and 2024 budget. I would like you to share your thoughts with me in the comment section, and I will drop some links to some articles I sourced for this video in the description. Do want to read it up and get yourself updated as to what is happening within the economy. Till we see again, Godspeed.